Okay, I'll run through this as quickly as I can, and maybe we'll get Albert in. We'll see how time pans out. What Robert Greene was telling us is one incident amongst so many that we find it hard to comprehend. Okay, what we've got is examples of where the police and the judiciary and key people in government, local and main government, are colluding in corruption and paedophilia. And Brian will tell us about that later on. The key point is, as Mike has said, is that we can no longer rely on our representatives to do anything about it. We have got to take control. Okay, that's we the people. These people are no longer doing their jobs properly. The police, the judiciary, or the politicians. Okay. And that's why the British Constitution Group make the case for lawful rebellion, taking back control. Our campaign is to get 1 million people throughout the country signed up to lawful rebellion. Before I go into the detail of what lawful rebellion is and how it's constituted, I'd like to take you back a little bit into the build-up and put this campaign in the context where we are now. And in that light, I'd like to sort of mention the basic background, the architects of the European project. Okay. Now, what they did, they decided that behind closed doors, in secret, and without our permission, that they were going to divide and conquer. They decided that the UK would be devolved, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and that England was to be broken up into 9 entities to be directly controlled from Brussels. And this was to bypass our Parliament and, of course, democracy. Now, John Prescott was given the job to sell this idea, and he pretended it was his brainchild, which it was not. And he sold it, or tried to sell it to the people as championing local democracy, right? Now, the North-East was going to be the guinea pigs, because they thought they could sell it to you with propaganda and lies, okay, and they could hoodwink you. But the North-East people are a canny lot, and they saw through the scam. They knew what was going on, and they gave a resounding no to the government and to the European Union breakup. The quisling Prescott then had to go back to the European Union and explain that he wasn't going to get this through. So the question about having a local democracy through regional assemblies was scrapped, referendums were scrapped, and we were given them anyway. So much for local democracy, Mr. Prescott. The lie was exposed, of course, that their aim was not democracy, it was autocracy. It's a dictatorship. We then move on to Tony Blair and New Labour's promise that we would get a referendum on the EU Constitution. Named the Lisbon Treaty when the French and the Dutch rejected it, because once again they started to realize what was really happening. There was a dictatorship being put in place. So the French and the Dutch said no more. So what did the Europeans do? They actually converted it into the Lisbon Treaty. And the lie was that it was no longer the Constitution, but that's exactly what it was. David Cameron thought that he could win a few votes with his wheeze, which was if the treaty wasn't ratified, he would give us a referendum if he was elected, knowing full well that the ratification process would go through before an election. So that was Cameron's wheeze. Now that the Lisbon Treaty has been ratified, Cameron is quite categoric, stating that, well, it's been done, there's nothing he can do about it. Now that's a confession, isn't it? Who's running the country? Who will be running the country? Will it be David Cameron or the European Union? The European Union. So the result is, ladies and gentlemen, that we now have a European Constitution in place. Our European masters are dictating the terms, And our politicians have colluded to destroy our own constitution. The ratification of the Lisbon Treaty, with the full knowledge that that was a constitution and would override our own constitution, is an act of treason. And that is a very powerful accusation, but it's absolutely true that our political establishment have all committed treason against us, the people. We've been betrayed by our own politicians, and Magna Carta 1215, which is a component of our Constitution, provides a mechanism by which we can get remedy, and that remedy is lawful rebellion. So the British Constitution Group was set up to give voice to the people, to enact lawful rebellion, and to take back control of our country. We want to deal with the duplicitous politicians. They have lied, they've cheated, and they've deceived us. But it would be presumptuous of us to declare that we know your minds. So we need to ask the question, which I'll do so now. Ladies and gentlemen, in this room, how many people think that we should govern ourselves? And who thinks we should not? I think they call that unanimous. And yet, our politicians have done precisely the opposite. They have transferred our national sovereignty to a foreign governance. Throughout the UK, the British people are consistent on this point. There's unanimity that we want to govern ourselves. So the BC group, the British Constitution Group, has proposed that we do this through lawful rebellion and alternative governance. Now those are fine words. What we now need to do is to move this into a practical reality. And again, that's what we've been doing. We are now running conferences around the country to get people to join the British Constitution Group and to sign up to lawful rebellion. But we're also having conventions. And the conventions are bringing people with the skills and the abilities to actually start putting in process the running of alternative governance. It's not a plan that happens like that. It's a process. It's a process by which we talk about lawful rebellion. We talk about alternative governance. We explore all the ways in which this can be done. And this is the process that's been happening now. So 2010 will be a very significant year because this is the year that we seriously stop all the talking and start the doing. So what we need to do now is identify key things. How can we take back control of our country lawfully and non-violently? First question, what is lawful rebellion? Question 2 is, can it be justified? How might it be implemented? Sorry, what is alternative governance? How might it be implemented, and who is going to do it? Lawful rebellion is the withdrawal of our consent to be governed by this or any government that will not hold up our constitution and the rule of law. It is our right to do so. It is our right enshrined in the British Constitution, Magna Carta 61, that simply says that if our politicians, our leaders, break the law and they do not respond to our request for remedy, then we will go into lawful rebellion. And
I just wanted to mention that I brought this up in court recently, and the prosecution and the magistrates and the clerk, the justice clerk, said that Article 61 had been repealed by King John's son, the next king in power, had repealed that.
Well, Albert will fill you on the details later on, but the bottom line is that they cannot repeal our constitution. That was a nonsense. This is a trick they use, okay? The constitution is between the people and the monarch, okay? It's our constitution. It was agreement not done by Parliament. The Parliament didn't even exist then, okay? And the only people that can change our constitution is we, the people. So that is a classic example where they're trying to hoodwink us into thinking that we are no longer protected by our constitution. It's an outrageous lie.
You and it's that it only applies to balance, to which I replied, that's insinuating that balance are different legal, lawful rights to common man.
Exactly, and of course, and again, Albert would point out that who was standing behind the barons? The people, right? That's our constitution, and don't be fooled by those lies, okay? The key point about being able to justify our actions is quite simply this, that treason has been committed by our own politicians. Neither the judiciary or the police have responded to our demands that they uphold the rule of law. And the other important point is this, is that we are now moving to lawful rebellion, but that is not mutually exclusive to what we're also doing, which is going through the process to the police, and Albert will go through the process with you when he does his speech, of how we're actually continuing to use the system that's in place now to try and get these people to wake up to what we're demanding. So lawful rebellion is acting in the same time as we are approaching the judiciary and the police to do their jobs properly. And as you can imagine, as we get close to our 1 million people, what are they going to be doing? They're going to be taking a lot more notice than when there's 10 people arguing the toss. I promise you that already talking in the House of Commons now about there's going to be a rebellion. And we know the courts are talking to each other. The courts are getting concerned. I personally have been in court and I've had 3 judges stand up and walk out on me when we challenge them. And we are developing a reputation for actually doing what we need to do to take these people to task, okay? So what can we do? Key point here is without the numbers, we can't do anything. That's the reality. Lawful rebellion is a romantic notion when there's 10 people. But when there's 1 million people, it's a very pragmatic solution to the problem. And that's the point. So all of the issues that I raise now is about, with the numbers, we can do what we want to do. We can create self-sufficient communities that can develop their own systems of banking and funding. Again, we have got people working on the banking scenario. So these aren't just conversations that we're having. These are actual practical issues that are being looked at and dealt with now. That's what the conventions are doing. We can legitimize our refusal to pay council tax and make private arrangements for those services that the councils are offering us. We can make our own arrangements. That is something we can do. And again, I've been in court challenging the council on their council tax. And I make the point that we don't expect anybody to do this at this point in time, because individually it is difficult. You've got to be prepared to stand up and have an argument with the judge and potentially risk being thrown in prison. Okay, so we don't expect anyone to do this until such times as they're fully competent in the systems that are being used. They haven't thrown me in prison, and each argument I have, I go through a process. The point is we can do this through the lawful process, right? We can block the actions of the courts and the bailiffs lawfully. We can stop them acting against us personally and against our property. And again, we don't expect anyone to do this until we've gone through the process, and we again are going through the process. I'm having battles with 2 bailiff companies in my own area, and I have given them notice not to come anywhere near me, okay? So I'm using my legal rights to say, no, I have withdrawn my consent to be governed by this lot, and I refuse point blank to pay taxes to them at the moment, okay? That's my choice. And as this process happens, we will give example to everyone else as to how you do it or how not to do it, okay? So this is a process. We can nominate our own sheriffs to take responsibility for our own lawbreakers, subject to our own definition of what they might be. So again, this is a process. In the same way that we can opt into, or opt out of their system, we can opt into our own system. We give consent to our own organization and take part in that. So again, it's a consent. We withdraw our consent from this government, and we give consent to be part of lawful rebellion. We do not have to put ourselves in conflict with the enforcement authorities. We don't want to fight with them, okay? We merely have to explain to them, with numbers behind us, that we are putting restrictions on their authority against us. And again, with that, we can do this. We have the power to do this. We can tell the police, sorry, your authority no longer applies. We have our own arrangement. We're going to have tussles with the authorities. That's a reality. As we challenge their authority, we're going to have tussles. Some will win, and some we will lose. We are winning some. We are losing some. But every time we challenge, we're wearing them out. And as their authority, as our numbers grow and their authority wanes, we get more and more powerful. Okay? The strength comes from the numbers. We already have a number of successes. And a very few rebellious individuals actually have already made a significant difference. Just imagine what 1 million people will do, right? We are not advocating the removal or the overthrow of this supposedly democratically elected government. Our position is quite clear. If you voted for them, you're welcome for them. You are welcome to have them. But it's not for me, and hopefully it's not for our members. We're clear that we're offering alternative governance. We're not replacing them. You want to obey their rules, that's fine. We're talking about alternative governance, which is a process. We will slowly but surely start taking over responsibility for those things which we're able to do so in stages. And the more authority we take for ourselves, the more we'll be able to take. At some point in time, we'll be able to say, I'm sorry, we are simply not paying our council tax. We have got all of the facilities that we require that you are offering, but we're paying 1/4 of the price. And I can give you an example. We can make private arrangements for our rubbish to be removed. We can make arrangements, insurance arrangements for the fire department. If we have a fire, we call out the fire department, and insurance will cover the cost. Same with ambulance service and so on and so forth. The debate about the National Health Service, we've all paid for it, and we are progressively paying through a whole series of taxes and VAT. So we are paying our way. So we are not dodging taxes. We are actually contributing, but in a different way, a way that suits us better. Okay? The point that we're making is that as our system starts to kick in, we'll show by example that the system's work is more effective and is also more cost effective. So we lead by example. How many people have heard of common purpose? Right, okay. Well, you'll recognize 2 of their key phrases here, right? Leading beyond authority, that's what we're doing, and we're thinking outside the box, that's what we're doing. Common purpose, we've been listening to you. Yeah. There is only one way in which alternative governments can actually be instigated. There is only one way, and that's through the numbers. It's the power of the people, it's through the numbers. We want 1 million rebellious Britons prepared to stand up for their rights to govern themselves. It is as simple as that. And we need to stop talking about it and start doing. And the first thing that we need to do is to sign up to Lawful Rebellion. The process is simple. Go online, thebcgroup.org.uk, and I'll repeat that, thebcgroup.org.uk. Sign up to Lawful Rebellion. The process is simple. There's a pledge there. We are actually working through the pledge. We ask everyone to pay £1 a month. £12 a year is not a lot to pay for your freedoms and your independence to get those back. We do need the resources for the leaflets, for these meetings, and so on and so forth. So we're asking people to make that contribution as well. We're also conscious of the fact that implementation of alternative governance requires planning. And that's, again, is why I mentioned that the conventions are already underway. We're starting to bring together the planners. And on that point, we're actually looking for you guys to put yourselves forward as first points of contact and to offer ideas and a contribution as to how we wish to be governed. The process starts with the conversation, the talk now. The first points of contacts are individuals. We've got first points of contact here. We'll talk to you later. But we want first points of contact who will eventually have small meeting groups of up to 10 people, and they will communicate with their nearest first points of contact. We have a map online. The idea is you put yourself online, you represent your small group, and you communicate with other groups. 2 or 3 groups come together, and you have a bigger meeting, and you get the word out, you pass the message, etc. So that's the whole process that we're going through now. So it's being structured. So the whole structure is dozens of groups. We've got 80 first points of contact all over the United Kingdom at the moment. We want that to grow, 100, 150, 200. It's a process. It might take us 12 months. It might take us 2 years. It might take us 10 years. But the bottom line is, it's our agenda. We're moving at our pace. We don't have to rely on their newspapers. We've got our own paper. We have got a substantial network on the internet. We're talking to each other. We ignore the main media as well, because we're not going to get any assistance from them. So we're forming community structures. We're building our membership, and we're cooperating with each other. So the business is moving on. It's our view that lawful rebellion will be the fastest and most effective way to achieve our objective. What we do know is that there is no way, it doesn't matter whether it's the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats, or New Labour in power, they are not going to respond to the requests of the people to give us our country back. It's up to us. Any questions? Well, I must have done that thoroughly. So,
you have an oath of office.
I think it comes from my heart. I'm going to do my best. It's as simple as it could be.
I think my wife believes the new men who went to pay the subscription to go and Russian, we still can't pay.
Yeah, look, we're having me today. The thing is that we've had an issue with PayPal, okay? And yes, you know, unfortunately. And we are trying to resolve it. We're trying to communicate with PayPal for weeks. And Mike has just found out what the problem was or is, etc., etc. So bear with us. It should be functioning in the next week or so, hopefully, or not now, that we're getting around this. So a lot of people have said they had trouble getting on the membership and so on and so forth. So it's work in progress. If you appreciate that, you know, we are flat out. I mean, just trying to do this whole thing together. But we get more and more people coming to us helping. And I can't emphasize enough, guys. Get online, sign up to the British Constitution Group as a member, and if you are in an area where there isn't a first point of contact, put yourself up as a first point of contact. There's nothing to do. It's just a point where people can phone you and say, yeah, yeah, and talk about it. You know, you meet in the pub, you adopt the pub, and you start passing the message. 2 or 3 people is all we need to start this thing rolling in each area, okay? Madam, you had...
Could your organisation vote for UKIP?
On the election front, okay, this is my personal opinion, right? The group has said categorically that we believe that the traitors in Parliament are New Labour, the Conservatives, and the Lib Dems. They're the people that got into this mess. If you vote for them, you're voting for you know, traitors, okay? So we've advocated voting for all of the other political parties that advocate our independence, okay? And of course that would include the UKIP. But we're not taking a political position, yeah. The reality is, and this is my personal opinion, UKIP's policy is to revoke the 1972 European Communities Act. It would be declared null and void by the European Court. They've already done it. With the 1988 Shipping Act, okay, which said that only British people could own British fishing boats because the Spanish and the Portuguese were coming in and registering their ships as British companies and taking all our fish quota. So the British government introduced the 1988 Fishing Act, which said that that was unlawful. The European, that was an act of Parliament, our so-called sovereign Parliament, which they keep claiming, which is a nonsense. And the European Court ruled that was null and void. So there was already a precedent that the European Court can overrule our government. As long as our government acknowledges and recognizes the European Union, they have to recognise its laws. So if UKIP got into power and tried to actually, into office, not power, falling into the same trap, they call it power, because it's office. If UKIP tried to revoke the 1972 European Community Act, first thing was all the other parties would gang up against them anyway, right? And secondly, of course, the European Union would say, no go. And the issue there is that now that this government has given the European Union its own legal identity, its legal personality, the European Union stands equal amongst nations. And they could take the European court, the European government, to an international court, and whose side do you think the international court would come down on? They would come down on favour of the European Union, because it's quite specific in the treaty agreement that the UK government knew what was getting up to. So the UK government is in no position to actually reverse it. It would lose it in court. That would take 10 years and more. So meanwhile, we're all twiddling our thumbs, part of the European Union, and as each generation passes and passes and passes, the fact that we're an independent nation fades into the distance, right? So really, the bottom line is the only choice we have now, the only remedy we have, is lawful rebellion.
But UKIP's main thing is to come out of Europe.
But they can't. If UKIP takes the chalice of government, right, they pick up all of the problems inherent in this parliament.
They could go to the people and say we're coming out. They can't fight us, can they? The Europeans.
Well, again, this is the bone of contention. This is the argument, and you know, UKIP are putting this forward as their plan. But I'm telling you now, my view is if they try to revoke the 1972 European Community Act, the European Court of Justice will turn around and say it's null and void, and they will create an international debate.
But there's no law to say that the people can't ask their government to come out. The European Union couldn't do anything, and they're going to go to war with us.
85% of the people, right, through poll after poll after poll, said categorically to our government, we do not want the European Constitution. How much good did that do us? So it's not what the people want or say or anything else, it's what the people do. And at the moment we're powerless because we have no mechanism by which we can put pressure on the government. Once they're elected, once they're in power, this is not, remember, this is not a democracy we live in anymore. This is an elective dictatorship. Every 5 years or thereabouts, we get one day in which we get our say. And it's a bit like a gamble. Every day thereafter for 5 years, they ignore what we want. And we know that for a fact. So we have got to take things in hand, and we've got to build our power group so we can say to the politicians, now we're telling you what we want. We've asked you nicely, you've ignored us. UKIP gets into power, they pick up the mantle of government or office in Parliament, and they will be voted down by a European court. That is my view on that issue.
But at the end of the day, they can still come out of it. We're still free to be able to come out of the European Union.
No, they will override it legally. They will simply say to you, me, and everyone in this room, they will say, no, you can't. And they have now got the authority through their own European army. Don't forget this. Our army is depleted. It's a fraction of what it used to be in size and in strength. And they are growing. They've got sponsorship of 26 nations, right, in their army. They would claim the legitimacy for the basis of retaining law and order, and they would put their troops or their police force in our country to retain law and order. They would use the legitimacy that they claim to actually overrule our government. And it's a power issue. The only way that we can actually put any threat back against them is if the people have united beyond the politics of today, beyond UKIP, beyond Conservatives, and so on and so forth. We have to be a powerhouse to be able to say, we don't care what the politicians say, we, the people, are governing ourselves. Thank you very much. So that's the process I believe you should follow.
You want to ask one for me? Oh, I was only going to say there is one way of getting us out. Just stop their money, they'll kick us out then.
Okay, again, this is fine. No, that's right. Stop their money, but that's the government that have to do that, and they get sued. Because as long as they recognise, as long as people recognise our Parliament, as long as they recognise the EU government, they have to obey their rules. The only time it's going to change is when somebody says, we don't recognise you anymore. And the Parliament, the government, has no authority to actually say to the European Union, or no intention, never mind authority, of saying to the European Union, we don't recognise you anymore. right? And that's the point. There is no mechanism in place to do that. And all the talk is nice. And this is the difference between talk and practical reality, is if UKIP get in and say they're going to do something, and then realize that the law of the European Union overrides what they say, what do they do then?
Well, they would have the power of the people behind them. So
Well, it's not as easy as that, because here's the point, right? Power of the people is a statement, it's a phrase. It doesn't mean anything until there's a practical application, right? Now, stop paying our council tax. This is a practical application. When we have 1 million people on board, right, when that happens, we will be asking everyone to meet in groups, and we'll plan our actions. And what we're going to do is we're going to stop paying our council tax lawfully, okay? And the system will start to collapse. As it starts to collapse, more and more people will join us. Now, what we're not going to do is not going to abandon the people who are employed. We will just have alternative governance. That's the point. We're not going to destroy the system. We're going to transfer the power from the elites back to the people. So it's a mechanism, it's a process, and it doesn't happen overnight. It proceeds.
If I just add one bit, because this is a really hot topic, and we get asked. UKIP comes up a lot. Just a personal opinion. In all the work that I have done to date, I have never had any help from the leadership of UKIP. Absolutely none.
That should tell you something.
Have I had excellent help from people who are UKIP members? Yes. And what I personally see in this next election round, and somebody can correct me if you know better, is UKIP leadership has still not got the guts to talk about the real issues. They won't talk about the fraud, the corruption, the child abuse, and the treason. UKIP still will not talk.
Gerard Batten does. He's talking all the time.
My newspaper has got Gerard Batten on the front page.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Treating him as an individual, but I am talking about the collective leadership of UKIP. Now, you may get upset about this, but it's gone on for ages. Our movement that we need to get individuals engaged, we've got to break out. Are you a Tory? Are you BNP? Are you a Green? It's got to come back to, are you a decent, upstanding, moral human being?
And the key point is, and this is a very important issue, is that we are not divisive in our approach. We are cooperative in our approach. And what you'll notice is in the strategy that we laid down there, the key thing was small groups deciding what they want, how they want to be governed, a convention that is actually constructively looking at the pros and cons, and offering those systems to the individual groups, so it grows from the bottom up. And the thing about the small groups is that they are now learning to cooperate. For decades now, we have just been told what to do, and we've just accepted it. So we start the conversations get people thinking, and we start to realize, actually, governing ourselves is not as complicated or as expensive as this lot seem to make out. Where's all the money going? Right? It's going in corruption. It's going into... I mean, I read the paper this morning. 6 members of Parliament have been asked to repay £50,000 that they have taken, right? Now, if it was you or me working for our companies, we'd be in prison. They wouldn't just take the £50,000 back. We would be in jail for corruption, for theft. Members of Parliament, however, they just made the mistake. Rubbish. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were stealing from us, okay? So it's one law for them and it's another law for us. So we cannot rely on the political system anymore to actually give us justice. It just doesn't work. It's broken. It is not fit for purpose. We, the people, cooperating together, will start to rebuild the system, and we will show by example exactly how the system should work.
So in other words, you don't need any political parties.
Well, okay, that's another debate for another day, but potentially what you have is with groups and individuals acting in cooperation, you're going to get people who have different views and different opinions and different ways of doing things. So you end up creating political parties, and that's a long conversation for another day. That lady there?
Can I ask you to expand a bit on the banking aspect?
Oh, yes. Right, do you know anything about money or where it comes from?
No, but this is quite a basic question. I mean, would you have envisaged eventually, if this is successful, a totally new economic system, basically, no more currency?
Yeah. I mean, again, this is the debate that boils up. Well, I'll give you a quick summary, okay? But my view, again, it's my view, and my view goes into the pot with a thousand other views, is that collectively, the way money is created, it actually is created from nothing. I could write on a piece of paper now, this is worth £5, and I could offer that to that lady there and say, please take this for payment. I've just made the money out of nothing. And you would take it from me subject to you being able to offer to someone else and being accepted. And just for the exercise that that gentleman behind you accepted that £5, you could then offer it to that lady there, who then, for services that I would render to you, or you to me, you would give me that £5, and I would take that £5 back because it's legitimate as far as I'm concerned. I started in the first place, at which point I would rip the money up. Okay, I would destroy that £5 now. What's happened is the service between myself and you and that gentleman, you and me, has happened. So money is a means by which trade and services are provided. So the money itself doesn't have any value. And what we've got at the moment is the banks are creating money from nothing, but they're not giving it to us to use for our benefit. They're charging for the privilege. Where did they get the rights to create our money? Government should have that authority and power. So in looking at the alternative government, we are looking for an alternative money system as well. And it does literally mean creating the supply. The other thing that I would note in that system is with 1 million people, the object, the exercise, the ideal is to have communities where we're self-sufficient. We've got our plumber, our baker, our candlestick maker, our mechanic. We can provide our food, all our services, and then we can actually operate that system by setting up bank accounts so that we can digitally transfer the services from one person to the other through the banking system. So that idea is underway. It can't happen overnight because you need the numbers. It's a numbers game.
I mean, my view is that unless you replace Mr. Rothschild and all his friends,
that's exactly
we
the
will
point.
never
Yeah.
solve anything.
We have to set up a system that is entirely independent of the Rothschilds and so on and so forth. And the only way we can do that, of course, is through having enough people to be self-sufficient. All of our services, if we can provide within our communities all of the services, then we can literally push that system to one side. Now, that gives us the authority to deny their taxes, deny their ability to penalise us, and so on and so forth. We set up our own banking system. That in itself is a complicated story. So, as I say, this thing is not something that happens overnight. It's a process. But those conversations are being had now. And if you have an interest in those particular areas or contribution to make, you should get yourself into the conventions which are happening throughout the country.
How do you find out where they're on?
If you go online to the BC group, the conventions, right, we're inviting people who have a view and opinion as to how we should supply our food to get involved, our money system to get involved, local government how to get involved. So all of those issues, we're now talking about those things, and we want people to come out of the woodwork, if that's the right expression, to actually start getting involved in that system.
I mean, the problem you say, like, you seem to, my impression is that you've got a bit of time to play with, but do we? I mean, these guys want a one world government, one world currency, chips, you know, no more cash. You know, there is some deadlines.
We can only move.
Some point.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We can only move as fast as we can move, and this is down to the people. If within this year we get 1 million people, the job's done. But we can only do as much as we're doing. So we're expecting you to pass the word, get the message out, explain the situation, and the other thing is, without getting too complicated about the whole thing, right, is that a lot of people just don't understand this. They have not got a clue. We reckon, our estimates is probably between 5 and 10% of the population are actually clued up. The rest of the people have their heads in the sand. They don't know what's going on, and even when you tell them, they don't believe it. And it's exactly the same situation with Robert Greene's story. Some people will say, that's too unbelievable. I don't believe that. Right? And it's only when Robert comes together with all the other people that we've spoken to that people start to say, well, there must be something in this. And then slowly, surely, they start to believe it. the monetary thing, they will understand as we explain it slowly, and so on and so forth. So there is a means by which we're actually getting the message across, but we're doing it on the solid basis of our Constitution. People understand that. It's a simple message. And that's why the British Constitution Group is actually getting the message across. It's about the Constitution. It's about the rule of law. Everyone understands that.
So I was thinking, another part of the reclaiming the financial system, we could look at how much they're spending on these unlawful wars waged around the world.
Yeah.
Big war on terror.
Yeah.
Like that, you know.
Yeah.
That's probably one point they'll insist on.
Well, 1 million people, I don't know if it was 1 million people, whatever, but marched in London about the war in Iraq. They didn't want to go to war. And Tony Blair, who said he was head of the armed forces, of course he's not. Her Majesty the Queen is the head of armed forces. And somewhere down the line, something's going wrong here. That you know, we've got the armed forces are being sent to illegal wars and so on and so forth. So all of those issues have to be debated and discussed, and that is part of the process as well.
Localization is pretty much the answer to the globalization problem.
Yeah.
There's a few people, especially even in the northeast,
Yeah.
who made, I don't think you see it yet, but you might celebrate today. Freemen on the land known as Michael, freeplanet.net wrote a lot of good stuff about localization. And that's the answer to, we don't need to look at all, let's look and see if UK for the answer, or let's look and see if no to EU are the answer. National parties aren't going to help us too much locally. No evidence to suggest they want it's good for us.
The word local is important because each individual in this room starts with you, okay? And then you join with, it's not about somebody else, it's about you. And you join with another person. When there's 3 of you, you can quickly grow to 10. The other important thing is about linking with all the other groups, right? Some people are freemen, some people are constitutional. There's a whole range of different people, but they all have one objective, and that's to take back control of our country. So we have got to listen to a wide range of people. We've got to take on board their views. It's not a one-horse race, okay? We can't carry this thing purely and simply on the Constitution. It just won't work. It's not broad enough. We can't take it forward just on the freeman issue. It's not broad enough. We have to bring all the groups together, and that's what the conventions are doing. They're providing the glue, as it were, to bring those things together. And that cooperation happens in meetings like this, where if you're a free man, if you're a constitutionalist, whatever, you've got to get together. And people who think, no, we don't need them, it's wrong. And that's why we're in this mess now, is because we've not been able to unite all of the groups into one body of action for the last 40 years. And these guys have just been pushing. They have got one body of group they're going for. You know what the story is? How many people think this is about world government? So right, there's a very strong element here that we think there's, some people don't. Some people don't think it's about world government. They just think that the politicians are lining their own pockets. I personally believe that this is about world government. This is what's going on. Go on.
You said that setting up a new banking system would possibly be complicated. I would disagree with that. I think the existing
you've got a job then.
The existing system is complicated in order to hide the crime of that they charge interest. If you get rid of interest and have the government control the money and create money, it's actually very, very simple. The complicated bit is convincing the population of that.
Okay, now, all right, now the point that you've made, this is interesting, that I've been studying the whole money thing for a long time. I've actually started down this road about 35 years ago, and there's something in the back of my mind that wasn't quite right about the money thing. And slowly but surely it's come together. And had I had this conversation with anybody 2 years ago, nobody would have understood what the conversation was about. Now, there's so many people to understand it. Now, that is in a short period of 2 years. All of a sudden, thanks to programs like Debt as Money, have you seen that program? Money as Debt? Okay. People are starting to understand how we've been conned. And that is a very important point, because that is cohesing people. That's, people say, hang on a minute, these banks have been stealing from us. They've taken over our monetary system. They've taken from the government. Hang on a minute. Why is it all the chancellors of the exchequer get jobs with the banks when they leave? Oh, that's strange, isn't it? Because they're part of the system. The system is actually taking control of our money and of our democracy. So, point made.
Yeah, sorry, just 2 quick points. The first is the European Union agenda is actually privatisation.
Yes, of course, globalisation. Yeah.
But essentially what they're doing is hiving off all of the services. So they're selling off our hospitals, they're outsourcing, they're selling our schools, they're even outsourcing social services and all these sort of things.
Please.
Now, are we going to risk playing into their agenda, or is this an opportunity to sort of exploit it? The second thing I'd like to just ask briefly is what about historical precedents or things that are happening elsewhere? Are there any examples of people doing this successfully? And when there have been successful examples, for example, of people taking back their own autonomy or rebelling in one way.
1689.
Yeah. Well, what were the requirements for this to be successful? For example, did it require a certain degree of cohesion in their communities?
Let me answer that straight away, because this is very important. We do not need the majority of people to actually understand what's going on and support us. We need a sizable minority, okay? When there's more of us than there are of them, and our cause is right and just, then we take over. We just take over, okay? Now, I know it's simplistic, but that's the general theme of the issue, is that we need a sizable majority. With 1 million people committed to lawful rebellion, we take over, okay? Now, we leave their government because we're not trying to take over their government. I've mentioned before, they want it, they can have it. Now, there is a president, and the president, of course, was the Bill of Rights. The petition writes the Bill of Rights when we had lawful rebellion. And as a consequence of that, we removed the divine rights of kings and set in motion the fact that the people had a constitution and Parliament would be governed according to our laws, and the Queen, her job was to actually protect our constitution. And 300 years later, they're at it again. Okay? So once again, the people have to take control of the issue and say, look, you guys, either get back in line or we will take back over control and we're going to put you in prison. Okay, so that's the threat and the action. And then the first point of your question was?
EU privatisation? Are we playing into their agenda?
Well, okay. The point about the privatisation is that it's being managed by people in offices in control of the purse strings. Yeah. Where do they get the money from? They get it from us. We take it away from them, and we say, sorry, you're not getting any money anymore. We'll do it this way. So that's how we're not playing into their hands. We're actually breaking the link between their control over us, which is the money. It's all about money. So we take the tool away from them, and they're impotent, okay?
They want privatisation, but they also want taxpayers there to pay to bankroll them for everything they do, for all these businesses and what have you. It's a vicious circle.
Well, it's a vicious circle. I mean, we've got quangos, we've got regional assemblies, we've got European governance, we've got so-called national governance. We've got all these layers of
riding on the back of the rare taxpayers,
and all exactly, and all being paid. I mean, before we had regional assemblies, we had a councillor, the head of the council, who was being paid £40,000, and that went up to 50, and then 60, and then 70, and 80. Now they're getting paid £200,000, right? And the argument was that these people had to be attracted into these jobs. The top people, they were there already, right? They didn't have 200,000 to attract them in the first place, so that's a lie. It's another deceit. The reason they're getting paid £200,000 is because that's how they keep their mouths shut. So they won't tell us what's really going on and where all the money is being stolen. And there's a whole series of rackets that are going on. And all of these contracts that are being passed out for running the schools, for repairs of the schools and repairs of the roads. This is all part of the system. The whole, and it's my brother's mate got that one. Thank you very much indeed. We are being skimmed at every single. Sorry?
The Taxpayers Alliance, because they're heavily, of course, into, from a grassroots level, and
we're approaching
non-job of the week.
Yeah.
I mean, the local authorities especially are handing out money for non-jobs, things that are just not productive, not just social engineering things.
Well, that's part of the social engineering structure. We know that, and we know what's happening. We understand all those things. And it doesn't matter how we complain, when we complain, who we complain to, they're not going to change it, right? So that's why the system of alternative governance starts to undermine those foundations. We start to pull the rug from under them. And at that point in time, because the threat is also, this is a very important point, we're suggesting that when we've got back control of our money, all those massive pensions that you have promised, sorry, we didn't make the promise, you better go and talk to the guy who did. Okay, and that's another part of the threat.
Cherry on the cake.
Yeah.
Is the other day it was reported that the MEPs, European Union, are going to get nearly £500,000 salary a year. That's with expenses and wages and allowances.
That'll keep them quiet.
Yeah.
But can I just that gentleman at the back?
Yes, 25 years ago I stumbled across the banking scam when I was doing a fellowship at the Chartered Institute of Bankers.
Could you speak up a little bit, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, just about.
Yep. About 25 years ago I stumbled into this, became aware of the banking scam, and to cut a long story short, between getting that fellowship and the current day, I've considered one thing. What happens when the people find out about this? Here we are living it now.
Yeah.
I am hearing dozens of different theories about what we can do, what the people can actually do.
Yeah.
Mixed into those theories is a lot of social engineering exercises that are coming out about replacement monetary systems, which are being put in there by the very people who impose this system on you. Just to keep a bit of confusion going. Because, and this is the key, this can be stopped tomorrow. They issue our currency as a debt. That can be stopped tomorrow. Question is, how do we do that? And there is one simple answer to that, and it's almost so simple that people miss it. But I've pondered this and studied it in detail for the best part of 3 decades. All you have to do, because it is a scam, a fraud, a crime and a lie and anything else you want to call it, all we have to do is get an official in the public eye and ask them how they can permit a private institution to issue our currency as a debt, when in fact tomorrow they could change that.
Well, they've got that covered.
Yeah. No, go on.
Well, what they will say is they will say the Bank of England is owned by the government.
Well, we can prove that it's not, you see.
Oh, well, you've got the Bank of England Nominee Act, okay, which is their umbrella. No member of Parliament can ask about the Bank of England Nominee Limited. The ownership of the Bank of England is through the nominees, and that's how they run the con. If you ask a member of Parliament to ask a question about the Bank of England nominees, they can't do it. It's been banned. Don't ask me why, but they are.
I understand that entirely. So imagine that member of Parliament, and we'd want someone bigger than an MP to do it, but somehow you get them in front of a TV camera on a live broadcast and you ask them the question. That's one way of doing it, but I have considered this further. There's another way of doing it, and all it actually involves is asking the question in full public view. There is little point in pursuing other monetary questions as to how we're going to make the system work afterwards, because if tomorrow we could have our currency issued not as a debt, everything else can then unfold from there. And these people are cut off, incidentally. Their finances gone like that overnight.
Well, I mean, you've obviously thought through this process, and as many others, and again, you should be part of the convention, because it's people with some knowledge talking to other people with some knowledge that we are actually building the consensus and the option.
3 years trying to get the public in this country to stand up for this one issue, because there are many issues, as we're all aware, but this one issue happens to be the one thing that the people can actually change if they get up off their butts and actually physically do this. And I don't mean violently, I mean just literally go and challenge them.
Do we have any idea how close or far away we are from this target of 1 million people?
We don't talk numbers. We don't want them knowing what we're happening. We're obviously monitoring all the time. Look, you'll get a feel for it. You will know, because you'll be talking about it. It's starting to happen in the banks, in the cafeterias, and work, and so on and so forth. You will know. You'll get an instant for it.
It's less than 1 in 60 people.
Well, the point is that this process is not going to happen overnight, okay? We do not know whether it's going to take us 1 year or 2 years or 4 years or 10 years. The bottom line is the planning itself is going to take a period of time. So we only got one job to do, to focus on it, and that's to build our numbers, to get signed up to Lawful Rebellion, pass the word, sign up. So there's no panic, there's no issue about doing the things, because we're not there. It's just a simple case of sign up. So all I say to you is that if you leave here today and you walk away and you do nothing other than sign up to the British Constitution Group, then you've done what we're expecting or asking of you right now. And then progressively we will ask you to come to us and say, well, first points of contact for these areas here. So the process is in your hands. It's not in our hands. We've done our bit now. Sir?
Yeah, sorry, I apologise. I'm slightly late. I had another appointment, so I missed the initial presentation. But you mentioned it's all about money. Well, certainly a lot of it's about money, but it's more than that.
Yeah.
It's about, I believe, it's about one world government.
Yeah.
Where they're masters and we're slaves.
That's exactly the point.
And we can't do anything about it. We're finished. So, I mean, if it was just about greedy people wanting to buy a big yacht, Lamborghini, and have a few, concubines on the line, that wouldn't scare me, but it's one world government. To me, it's blazingly clear, and this money crisis has...
yeah. But remember, those people running this one world government system are very, very few people. And their power comes through our ignorance and apathy, okay? We are no longer as ignorant or apathetic as we used to be, and we are getting more interest in what's going on. I mean, if we advertised a meeting like this 2 years ago, there'd be 2 or 3 people here, okay? And next year, this room will be packed to the hilt, and it is growing daily. And it's up to us to start talking about it, to start. Have you heard about the British Constitution Group? What they're doing, why they're doing it? Do you know about, if you're comfortable talking about world government, go for it. But, a lot of people glaze over still. So you've got to, I'll tell you what's going to happen, okay? And this is, again, my personal view, is that these people are happy to take the money and the wealth and the comfort and the luxuries, providing there's no threat to them personally and their lives, okay? The threat that's coming up behind them very, very rapidly now is that we're going to put you in prison. We're going to put you in a grey box with a cell for the rest of your lives, and all the money in the world will not give you any comfort. Now, that threat, that ultimate threat, can only be implemented when there's enough people behind us to actually do that. Because I keep saying, when we are 1 million strong, we just take over, okay? We leave their government in place, and the choice is then up to people. You want that government? You can have it. You can pay the taxes. You can pay the council tax. We've got our own system here, and we've got our own monetary system. We are getting about building our communities. And if you want to come and see what we're doing, you'll find it's a darn sight cheaper in our uncorrupt system than it is in yours. And people will come in droves. And as they start to come over to our system, the people that they use, and remember, these are puppets. They're bought puppets. Those people will start saying, this is getting a bit, close for comfort. We may actually end up in prison. And we're going to tell the chief constables, if you do not obey the rule of law, we are going to put you in prison. And Albert will tell you this process now. The police are coming to these meetings, police are asking questions, police are starting to say, well, what's going on here? And slowly but surely, the police are starting to know, councillors are starting to know, politicians, even some of the politicians who are blind to what's going on, are starting to realize as well. But the threat is we're going to put them in prison.
But I don't think they're worried about that.
Not yet. Not yet. Oh, look, they're starting to get worried. I promise you, they are starting to get worried.
They're coming. There's probably some here, but they're spying.
But they're watching. They're taking a measure of how we're angry. Look, we're very, very controlled, but we're angry, and they know we're angry. And I can promise you, they are getting worried. Sir?
I've been, over the last while, I've been studying psychological operations and social conditioning and marketing and PO public relations and how that's used to manipulate the position of public and doctrine. So I see their medical techniques and come up with hundreds of ideas that could be used to...
got a job for you then.
Yeah, to use their conditioning against them. So you could...
Yes, yeah.
You could get pool money together and get up, say, bond 100,000, 50,000, doesn't matter. And you send it to everyone who's in a high position and say, I'll make a bet with you. Does the government loan money, or do banks create money out of thin air, and do you loan money of them to your house, thin air?
Well,
you give that to the public, and ideas like that, and one-off planned events, because that's what they do against us, 9/11 and so forth, and then use the conditioning that they've already inflicted on people like greed to counter up, to open people up and get them to start questioning things. And I think that's
well,
a form of strategy, a psychological strategy to counter their psychological warfare strategies, and then also form strategies to break down their position. Because that's why, the military, all the top militaries are invested billions and billions into sociology and psychology and conditioning people and all sorts of things. So we need to step up to that and respond back.
Well, we can.
This is brilliant. If I may, get a chance to talk later, I'll come back to you because I think this is
yeah, what you're suggesting is exactly what we're doing. It's a case of identifying the way they're using the systems and actually reversing the process, okay? And in very much the same way, some people are scared to do things because they're going to go to prison, okay? We know that we're right. We know we've got just on our side. And so we can reverse the process and say, look, guys, we're asking you to defend our liberties, our freedoms, and our Constitution and the rule of law. You're not doing it. If you don't do it, you're going to prison. That's a threat that we're going to live up to, okay? So they need to know that, and they do know that. Sir?
A very useful tactic, practical tactic to lawful rebellion, it falls under that, is naming and shaming. Lawyers very often.
What Rob was doing today, naming and shaming again.
Yes, and also corrupt council officials and all these monkeys, in the way I regard.
That's very polite, sir.
Well, they deserve that. And for example, the organisation to which I belong, we've been doing it for 8 years.
May I ask which organisation that is?
Scotland Against Crooked Lawyers.
Oh, okay. You've taken on a bit.
We have for 8 years. Well, what's 8 times 12? It's about 100. Sorry, no, it's 10 years now. It's 10 years. From the year 2000, we have named and shamed in no uncertain terms and accused them of all sorts of crimes, including paedophilia, and rape, and arson, and stealing people's estates, defrauding the deceased through their wills. Our leaflets have named and shamed 100, and usually as many as we can get on a leaflet. There is an example one. This one is on Angliae, 600 of which went out on Thursday, outside her office, and many went into her office.
You signed up as the first point of contact, as you should be.
Yes, well, what I'm suggesting here, I know we all tend to sort of, go on and on, but what I suggest, we get numerous requests from England. They want a group like ours in England, which actually gets out and names and shames crooked sheriffs and magistrates.
Well, what you should do is you should sign up as a first point of contact. We should put you down as a lead so that we can make the link with the English side of things, and it's an important part of what we are trying to do is bring those groups together. Now, the point is, what you said is we need to come together. This is the machinery by which that actually takes effect now. So sign yourself up as a first point of contact. Let us know what your speciality is. We'll then start to put you in touch with, because we've got people in jail in Cardiff at the moment, okay? A guy who is trying to expose corruption of police, and they are using thuggery, intimidation. It's disgraceful that they have got a bench judge on the bench, and this sort of thing needs to be stopped. But there's a half a dozen people there, and they can just ride roughshod over half a dozen people. And that's why when these people go to court, when these people are being taken to court by these corrupt policemen and the judiciary, we need 100 people in the court, right, sitting there watching the judge, because that judge will think, uh-oh, things are changing. The mood will tell him, and that judge will think twice before he gets, puts across a corrupt judgment. And this is the thing, the power of the people. We're not using the machinery we've got. We know what we have to do. We have to come together, and as I keep saying, when you leave here today, sign up, become a member of the First British Constitution Group. Sir, make yourself a first point of contact, and let's start this ball rolling. Sir.
May I just finish my point?
Sorry.
The lady over there, who I think is very courageous and resourceful, you know, we the people, she keeps saying, like Jefferson, you know, the American president. People can, the way we've done it, I'm not claiming anything particular here, but you've got to get just a courtry of 3 or 4 people, and they can go down to the magistrate's court with big leaflets and a picture of the judge and say, you're a crook.
Yes.
Now that demeans, and people prefer past, that demeans them, and slowly people will join, and it is an extremely powerful tactic to name and shame, and when you do it, and I do suggest to people, that lady is quite capable of doing, never do it alone, they'll imprison you. Have 6 or 7 people, and be absolutely to the point, accuse them of whatever they've done. Obviously, you've got to be sure of your facts. And that, if that happened repeatedly over the country, it would be an enormous contribution to lawful rebellion.
Yes. Well, it's part of the machinery that we want all of these individual ideas, groups, organizations to come together so we can put it under a single umbrella, because power is in the numbers and power is in our ability to coordinate all those groups, okay? So, sir.
Well, if I could just, because you've mentioned about the courts, but that's what I wasn't going to talk about that. But the courts, if you're going to have loads of people in court, all they do is have a smaller court and have less seats so that they can control the numbers that are in there, because you can't have people standing. So when you turn up with 100 to go into court, they'll have a court with 10 seats.
Well, there are courts, we could say we need a bigger court.
Yeah, because, you know, but what I wanted to talk about was, aren't you in danger of marginalising yourself, in the sense that a lot of the views, I agree with a lot of what you're talking about, however, some of them can be perceived to be too extreme for the public. And the powers that be will seize on that, and then will scaremonger, and as you start to grow, they will then try to make you as a radical group, like the BNP or anything else, so that then people start to fear you. And don't you think it's better to be actually attacking this problem from trying to work with communities, empowering communities, get amongst the communities, so that the system is trying to fragment everybody, you know, divide and rule, and that. You should be getting people in the communities, working with the communities, dealing with community issues, and then build up from there slowly and take control truly. As
all right, the point you make, which is enormously valid, which is the credibility of the message that we get across. And Albert is a great advocate for the fact that we are the British Constitution group. Okay. Now, the reality of the situation is that we are attracting a large number of people, but our message is it's the British Constitution and the rule of law. That is our message. Okay. And we can actually get a measure of what you think and want to hear about just by the questions that you ask. So we can quickly gauge how far we can talk about the various issues. And our approach, the British Constitution Group approach, is that it's our constitution, it has been broken, the rule of law has been broken, and that is the message that we're taking to the wider audience, okay? But whether we like it or not, the wider audience is coming at us on a very broad number of issues. And our job is to bring all those people together, all and sundry, on the simple and single premise is that we all want to take back control of our country. So. Well, hey, did you notice the Lawful Rebellion logo? Okay, now the Lawful Rebellion logo is part of a brand. We've created this brand. Now the Lawful Rebellion logo is going to be available for everybody. Sticky labels, which, you know, unremovable, ideal for police cars, right? Seriously, it just says Lawful Rebellion. There's no connection. Now, what's happening at the moment is all of the groups, all the various groups that don't have any connection, but we've got the Truth Movement and so on and so forth, are starting to put the Lawful Rebellion logo up on their website. So we're approaching these groups, and up goes the Lawful Rebellion website. So the police car with Lawful Rebellion, he wants to know who's done it. He's, right, wasn't me, Gov. Okay. Bus stops, buses, libraries, courtrooms, you name it, they're going to start appearing. Okay. And 50 Lawful Rebellion stickers We asked the local post office to put them up. The retailers are very cooperative in this because they're being oppressed by big government, okay? So that Lawful Rebellion logo is going to start spreading. And people, do you remember the orange launch? Do you remember that? All it said was that the future is orange. Just orange colour. And think, what the hell's that all about? And people are asking what's very clever marketing, okay? Lawful Rebellion, the same thing. What's Lawful Rebellion? Lawful Rebellion. Up comes all the websites, okay? That's interesting. And people who have a particular subject, be it paedophilia, be it the council, be it the fact that the courts, the judges, or the local lawyer has ripped them off, Lawful Rebellion, you know, corrupt judges or corrupt lawyers in Scotland. There's a site for them. So all of these issues can be umbrellaed under the Lawful Rebellion issue. The British Constitution Group is carrying the message. The banner that we carry is the British Constitution and the rule of law must be respected, and that's how we're taking this thing forward, okay?
The problem is this Labour regime under Blair and Brown have already created 4,000 new crimes, so they could easily produce one more, you know, which is, you know, they could even frame it as
they can't arrest
an anti-litter thing, you know, that you're it's graffiti, you know, you're looking up the amenity.
And who are they going to arrest? And this is the point, the Lawful Rebellion is a brand name, that they won't be able to arrest anybody because it wasn't me, Gov. See, we're street smart. We know what the process is. We know what we have to do. We know that they're looking for an angle. You made the point that they will try and divide us. They will try and cause extreme and so on and so forth. And we're aware of that. We're not daft. So we're aware of the situation, and we're stepping forward cautiously. We're putting in place systems now. And I'll give you an example, right? First points of contact all over the country. They are organising their own groups, right? They've got, there's dozens of different names of the groups. They're not all called the British Constitution Group, but they are affiliated, associated and involved, but they are different groups, and they've got their own websites. And they've got Lawful Rebellion. And we don't share the numbers. We don't pass the names around. We don't have a membership list. We don't have a hierarchy, a structure, a leadership. I'm here today, but next week it'll be someone somewhere else. So the whole thing is fluid, and it's about other people stepping forward and organising their groups, and those groups, and this is the key, those groups of 5, 10, 15, 20 people, whatever it is, communicating with the next group, which you'll see on the internet. Go on the internet site. Go to the map and you'll see your local region, you'll see a couple of groups there. You phone them up and say, oh, I'm in a group down the road, there's 3 of us, how many are you? Well, there's 5 of us, well, do you fancy coming over for a pint? You talk the system, you pass the word, and 5, 10 people meeting in a group, in a pub, every month, whatever, people say, oh, what do you guys do? And of course you leave your leaflets, Lawful Rebellion leaflets, so the word spreads through the system. We don't need their newspapers. We don't need their media. We don't need their television. We need the people, and that's how the system works.
Any advice, any tips, like how people can look out for infiltrators?
Well, you can't infiltrate. We're like jelly in their hands.
Well,
they might be
they
able
will
to.
try.
They will try.
Can I just answer this one? We're getting into a classic trap, which is where the other side wins us, which is we're all getting fearful. If we do this, they're going to do that, we're going to do that. Forget all that stuff. Right? If you don't build a structure, you cannot infiltrate it. It's impossible. If you stick in your little groups, gentleman says we should be doing things in communities. We agree. Little group in a community, could be in a city, a community, could be out in the countryside, wherever. That little group, all it's interested in is rebelling. If in the community the big issue is they don't want the Tesco supermarket on the doorstep, that's the rebellion. And you do your thing. We don't want to know, we do not want to know who your contacts are. If anybody says to you on the telephone, oh, can we have a list of who you're working with, don't give it to them. That includes me. The whole thing is, if you want the term, it's a resistance movement. You operate in little cells, you work with friends, you work with people you trust, and if you think somebody's not quite right, trust your instinct, don't work with them. But you have to talk to other people, because these people have got people so frightened they won't talk to another person because they may be on the other side. So first of all, you've got to talk to people, but be discerning. Now I'm sorry to get going here, but we started out saying we were going to tell the truth in Plymouth. And the first thing that happened was, I'm sorry, we had to part company with UKIP because the leadership did not want us to tell the truth. So we parted company and we started telling the truth about fraud, corruption, children, neuro-linguistic converts. And something started to happen. People came to our meetings, and then we got a little office, and then we started to produce a newspaper, and we're now nearly 1 million newspapers later. We've got videos all over the place. We can't cope with the number of people calling the office. Mike, who's joined us recently, who's come all the way to the south of France to get involved, used to say to me, Brian, what are you doing with your time all the day? Because you haven't done this, you haven't done that. Now he's in the office. He knows what goes on. So don't worry about infiltration. If you keep it loose, if you work in little cells, all they can do is infiltrate the little cell. Well done. The other thing is, 95% of the people being used to listen to us are victims themselves.
And they start to realise it.
GCHQ. Let's get some attention on this. GCHQ. So that everybody's going to be on that when the film comes out. Who do they recruit? Bright young people. 23, 24, 25. They're the ones that listen to the calls. They have to analyse it. Am I Al-Qaeda? Am I BNP? They have to do it. They have to listen to what we're talking about. But they're not stupid. So eventually, when they hear enough of the truth, they're starting to say these people are actually telling the truth. And then over coffee in GCHQ, they start to talk to each other. And this is happening with the police. We do a meeting, somebody sidles up to you at the end and says, I'm a policeman, I'm off duty. I'd just like to tell you that we had a major paedophile investigation in London closed down. We did all the work, we identified the paedophiles, we produced the report, and then my boss said we're dropping the case. He's mad, that man, that police officer, mad. So he comes and tells us about it. Why does he want to tell us? Because he knows we're going to tell somebody else about it. So we want these people to come to us. Yeah? And you will find that people in the GCHQ people are not all bad. MI5 people are not all bad. It's always that there's corruption in the organisation. So don't be frightened of these people. We want them to listen to us. We want them listening to phone calls, because then we can tell them the truth. But what we don't want is the little trick of collapsing an organisation. And what they do is they infiltrate, they create friction between people. They love it that they can play one person off against the other person. You spread some lies, you spread some disinformation, and the next minute it closes down. The Magna Carta Society, I'm told, if you go and look on their website, it says they've closed down because of the action by a small number of individuals disrupted their organisation. Why were those individuals able to do it? Because they had an organisation. But if you don't have a structure, and particularly a hierarchical one, a pyramid, you cannot infiltrate it. That's why Viet Cong guerrillas stayed in little groups in the jungle, and they caused, I believe, some big problems for one of the best, largest armies in the world. Sorry, Albert, can't be the best. But, yeah? So we've got, yeah, that's right. We've got to grip these people.
Can I just make the point? We're being approached by doctors, barristers, coming to us and saying, we now get the picture, and we're seeing these common purpose things. So they're coming to us. And the other important thing is I'm hearing about British Constitution Group meetings being held somewhere. I didn't know anything about it. Brian doesn't know anything about it, because people are actually taking action. So this is happening, and people are having these groups, and I'm getting letters in the post saying we had this, we did this. And again, the map on the internet is designed so you can communicate the fact that you're having a group meeting with other groups, and we don't know anything about it. That is exactly what we want people to do. And what they talk about, What they do is entirely up to them. So this organisation now is organically grown. It's individuals taking responsibility, and how better can you take control of your country than when individuals start taking responsibility themselves, and that's how it's working.
Can I just say a quick something?
Yeah.
People power. We've got a little town just outside of us called Tavistock, so we know it. And the McDonald's moved in, and they didn't want a McDonald's. Within 12 months it was gone. Nobody used it. They all joined together and said, we're not going to use it. Nobody used it. The only business they got was a few people passing by. Within 12 months it was shut down. That's people power.
Shall I close down? Yeah. One more question, then we're going to close down for lunch. Mike, is it going to an hour's lunch break? We'll have an hour's lunch break, so we'll actually nominate the time that we come back. And then Albert will tell you the way that he's running the treason campaign, okay, which is interesting. So can I have your question, sir?
No, it's not so much a question as such, it's just to sort of reassure people in here with that type of viewpoint. We hold a meeting every month, and the last Sunday we had...
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, the last Sunday we had, we started the meeting off, and it was like one person, two more than
right.
And there was 9 people. Yeah. Now we already got the list built up to 40 people. It meets in the Bridge Hotel every Sunday. I mean, if you were interested, every third Sunday of the month.
Can everybody in our group just put their hands up to show how many of us are actually here that actively meet every month for a minute?
And it is actually being
that will grow, that will go to 40, that will go to 100, that will go to 200. There's no stopping that movement now. And the only difference between it being 20 people and 3,000 people is this. Okay, so you guys now, it's in your hands, and if each and every one of you go out today and get one person and meet at that pub, is it big enough?
Well, we might need to look at bigger premises, but another point that Brian mentioned was, we had the same thing, and Mark, my colleague at the back, will agree with it. People were saying, well, we need to be careful, and Mark said, no, if you feel you need to be careful, that's the very thing you need to communicate about.
What I suggest that you do is adopt a pub, go to a pub and say to the landlord, right, we'd like you to show our lawful rebellion sign in your window, whatever, okay. They may be restricted because of the license arrangement, so just leaflets in there. And then split yourselves into 2 groups with different pubs, right, so you can spread via pubs. So if there's 40 of you, what you should try and do is have 4 pubs and move from one pub to the other. Now, what will happen is people say, who are these guys? And every couple of months, all of you go to one pub, so there's 50 in a pub, and we're going to have logos, we're going to have the labels, we're going to have the leaflets. So people start saying, what's going on here? You know, curiosity killed the cat. Well, we don't want to kill the cat, but you know what I'm saying,